Our conversation with Dr. Carly Nuday continues. One thing that we see and anticipate that you may get from this series is to begin to appreciate the different states of water, the consequences and effects of these states, and ultimately is to see water as this amazing tool, this amazing substance that it always has been, is, and always will be. Let us continue.
You know, and you mentioned the aquaporin channels earlier too. There's a lot of interesting theories that support the idea of a non-cell membrane, that it's not so much an envelope that we think of with channels, but that it's a liquid crystal membrane that opens up structure to incorporate, assimilate beneficial structure. I mean, it's a structural interaction. Things entering and exiting the cell is a structural interaction. So I'm not saying that it's not an aquaporin-based channel, but even you know, Pollack's work tends to lend towards the idea of a liquid crystal membrane rather than an actual, you know, cellular envelope.
Okay,
yeah,
I see.
Yeah.
As opposed to a pathway, so to speak.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, this is integrating structures. Bulk water, you know, it doesn't penetrate. It doesn't enter. It's not assimilative. And unfortunately, then if we're in a bulk water system, neither then are our nutrients or our toxins. You know.
Well, that's true, and the bulk water is not going to get every place. I oftentimes I'll talk about when a person has, you might want to say it, you might say there's inorganic scale and there's organic scale. The organic scale is inside the body, the inorganic is outside the body. But we call it plaque inside the body. Give it a different name. Oh, it must not be the same thing.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but oftentimes, that's really a plumbing problem. It's just a matter of you've got a blockage based on having too big molecules or compounds trying to get into too small of a space. So you end up creating a blockage, so to speak.
Sure.
You know? And so, again, providing more electrical, protons, electrons, however, to donate, that allows for these compounds, molecules to be broken up and then more natural, balanced, and you could say non-disruptive. It allows them to come apart, to dissipate, and then also to be distributed.
Sure. Yep. And if we look at, you know, structured water's ability to transfer energy, you know, we can see that structured water can allow these molecules to exist in its balanced state. You know, it can donate the electrical charge necessary to put these things in a balanced state, to take one inside the cell and distribute this one over here. We also see that, you know, we end up with an increase and a buildup of cellular waste, of waste within the cell that isn't able to be eliminated because we lack the structure necessary to carry things in and out and have effective detoxing. So we see a buildup of cellular waste. We see a buildup of plaque in lots of places besides just the cells. We see them in amyloid plaques in Alzheimer's, you know. And these are things of structure. If we really look at the science and we recognize that the structure of water determines the shape of the protein, and that the shape of the protein determines what that protein is and what it does, not the chemical compound, then we can see...
That's what Rustum Roy said.
That's right. So then we can see that a breakdown in this crystallography allows for things like mutated plaques to form. And so then we can look at something like Alzheimer's and say, well, is this a problem with the lack of structure? You know, now we have people, they're trying to, and they have been successful in disintegrating some of those amyloid plaques with sonic ultrasound. Well, we're affecting the water that surrounds this plaque by blasting it with certain frequencies.
Yeah, I was going to say another form of force.
Another form of force.
We got another gun.
So, and unfortunately, we don't know what the effect such a frequency induction to something like the waters of the brain will necessarily have. It may disintegrate that plaque. It broke down the structure that was holding that plaque together. Now that plaque has disintegrated, and now we have a breakdown in the waters of the brain that may exhibit a variety of other disruptions and functions. What we should be looking at is how to structure the water inside of the body. That I think is our best chance.
Way.
In a way that's harmonic with our own
Yes.
system. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm going to ask a question. Gee, that's redundant. Anyway, there's a term called frictional loss.
Mm-hmm.
And it happens in situations where of moving water over distances. Let's say you have at a certain flow rate at the source, and then you're going, say, a mile away.
Mm-hmm.
The pressure at the source is going to be one value,
Mm-hmm.
but you got to get it a mile away, and the pressure goes down over
Yeah.
time.
It's like electricity with resistance over
Exactly.
distance.
So the question is, to what extent does structuring water, or would making the water, put it in that state, what type of effect might it have on frictional loss? What could one expect?
Yeah, well, we could theorize that something like frictional loss also happens simply because of a resistance in the way that the water molecules are able to progress throughout that pipe. So if we look at something like structure, where energy is able to flow without resistance, without loss of information, theoretically, in a highly structured system, in the most highly structured system you would have no loss. It'd be like that zero entropy. It'd be like the syntropy, because you've got such a geometric precision that allows the energy to flow without resistance. That's not frictional loss.
Yes.
So there's no friction there.
Right.
It's actually moving as one continuous substance, one continuous lattice structure, rather than being in a less ordered state and having groups of structure or disorganization that is trying to push through this pipe.
Mm-hmm.
So that's
Well, I'm happy to hear that, because these are things, or these are factors that the questions have not come up, but few people in this area have. Sometimes they've never heard of it before.
Mm-hmm.
And then the next part of it, though, is it hasn't been tested.
Mm-hmm.
But in truth, it can be theorized. If
Mm-hmm.
you understand well enough the nature of the change that's being facilitated by this, you can actually predict what is likely or could happen.
Mm-hmm.
And so even if we acknowledge, okay, we haven't tested this, right, but this is what we theorize, it would be well to predict a reduction in the amount of frictional loss.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, that would be reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So in the same way, for example, with our dairymen, we had a 3-fold increase in the amount of available voltage.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that means I would say that portends a lower amount of friction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and less resistance and,
Yes.
and less loss of conductivity.
Because the irrigation system, the pivot that was fed by that line, was between 1/4 and 1/2 mile away.
Yeah.
And enough energy still got there to have sprouting occur 3 times, in 1/3 the time than was normal, traditional.
Right.
I think norms are going to change as more as we get these, but
Absolutely.
but that's what we saw.
Convention, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
So the other thing has to do with relative to the frictional aspect of it. The molecules themselves, the clusters become smaller.
Mm-hmm.
There's also a factor. We were touching on this with calcium or with the solids in the water, for example, because when water is in perfect balance, it'll be clear. And when water is, I'm going to say, flaccid, it tends not to have the ability to hold what's in it in suspension.
Mm-hmm.
So the elements, the minerals and stuff, if it's got the power, the potency, the movement, the dynamics of it to hold it, the energetics to hold it, all of that is in the water, but that dynamism tends to hold it there. They call it zeta potential, I think is another term that's used. Mm-hmm. And so when the water ramps down, it can't hold it, or it has less ability to hold it in suspension. If it drops out, it becomes plaque, it becomes mm-hmm. all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And the molecules are bigger, and you get higher frictional loss, and mm-hmm. on and on and on. Mm-hmm. There are relationships that we can actually see happening.
Absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely.
Mm. Okay. Well, there's in industry, in commercial applications with pipelines and things like that, frictional loss is a major factor.
Yeah. Yeah. Just like scale buildup being a major factor in steam boilers and things like that. I mean,
absolutely.
These are major factors. These
yes.
are major issues.
A lot of applications for it, a lot of need for different solutions. Mm-hmm. And, mm-hmm. well, that's kind of why we're here. We see those needs, yeah. and people who see it and understand it well enough, now we provide some solutions for them.
Yeah. I think that once you really understand the issue and the potential benefit, it, at least from my perspective, it becomes very hard not to want to get involved and promote the growth of this work, information, application, and so it's become my motivating driving force, So kind of the I will not stop till we're all drinking structured water and all of our produce is produced by it. So that's the idea. I really do see a real way to transform our society and our world on virtually every level through the application of these principles. So, I hope to get a chance to see that.
Well, you and I do both. And that is really why this is a special time for me personally as well, not only for meeting you and to have this time, an opportunity to exchange thoughts and ideas mm-hmm. with you and share about your book, but also the prospects of helping one, it's not just the consumer, to see where this is and to begin to appreciate the nuances that we're discovering, because really unless you're looking for them, and they're hard to notice. Mm-hmm. But it's also the producers, it's the manufacturers, it's the practitioners, it's certainly is the farmer and the rancher. It's also the politician. It's mm-hmm. everyone, because water affects everyone everywhere. Yeah. It's the manager of the skyscraper, the office building. They have water systems in there, and the human beings, all those big hotels that are a mile high and yeah. stuff, they'll get to a mile high before you know it. They're sending water up and down. I'm positive this type of thinking has not yet permeated into the engineers and the architects. Right. These are the ones we need to be talking to yeah. and need to understand yeah. these things. So yeah. they begin to plan it. The people who are designing communities and that are to be built, mm-hmm. every exactly. home should have, or every community and every system, yeah. every new one yeah. should have these units, so that when the water comes out the spigot, yeah. it's got energy in it. It's yeah. alive. Yeah. Okay? it ain't flaccid.
That's right.
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm gonna use that word, flaccid water. Okay, it's either got life or it's flaccid.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
yeah. And that's, you know, and we talked about bottling earlier, you know.
Yes.
I mean, the amount of applications that we use water in is astronomical. And to consider that every time you structure water, there's a benefit to what it is that you're trying to accomplish.
Right.
You know, it just seems really silly not to consider transforming the way that we work with water based on this information. And those kinds of things, you know, engineers and architects and communities, you know, upcoming communities, it's just about awareness. You know, people just need to know the legitimacy of structured water. You know, this is not a marketing gimmick. It's a scientific term. You know, it's not a so, and it's unfortunately misused as a marketing gimmick in some ways.
Right.
But you know, it's really about awareness, and I think that as people become aware of not only the importance but the benefits and the growth that we're seeing from application, things like the dairymen, then I think it's only a matter of time before everyone really does come around.